I'm going to be throwing a lot of information at you in this video, so I apologize if it's basically feels like a fire hose of information, but we will get through it, and that's why I'm recording this, so that if you want to go through the video again, you can. What I'm going to cover here is just a variety of tips for playing as the Union. I'd say that the culmination of all this originates both from my experience playing the game, things I've seen, mechanics that I've experienced in the game, and then also if you go to the AGEOD Civil War 2 forums, there's some information there that's pretty helpful that I've used in this game. I'm going to try and organize it as best I can so I'm not all over the place, but again, it's going to be a lot of different stuff, so hopefully you can follow along and I don't go too quickly. And if there's additional tips that you have for playing as the Union, or if you have some questions about the things that I address here, please let me know and we can cover it in the comments section. Alright, number one, always do the blockade on your first turn in the game. So now I'm in 62 of March, so I can't show you it, but there's that option at the very beginning of the game in your I want to say it's Department of State tab. Do the blockade. I don't think there's any reason not to do it. And then what'll happen is you get these blockade ships that over time populate, and then you can use them. I'm gonna double back towards the end of this video and talk about your Navy and blue water and brown water options. But I just focus on this particular topic right now since it's like literally like the first turn of the game. So you might as well cover that now as the first part of this video. So definitely do the blockade. I don't see any reason not doing it. Tip number two, try as best as you can to get Manassas by October of 1861. The reason is that if you're unable to take Manassas by, I think it's either early October or late October of 1861, you will suffer a national morale penalty of 10. So I want to say the Confederates, I'm not sure if the Confederates get a boom of 10 and you get a negative 10, but I know for a fact as the Confederates you get a negative 10. So if you can, if at all possible, take Manassas before October of 61. That'll keep you from taking that 10 national morale hit. However, if you're playing a good Confederate player, it may be difficult for you to dislodge him from Manassas in 1861. It may be something that's more practical in the spring or summer of 62. But just be aware that in October 1861, if you don't have Manassas, you're going to suffer a 10 national morale hit. And so just be ready for that. Since I'm talking about national morale, the lower your national morale is, the more difficult it is for you to win battles. So if you have a high national morale, then if the Confederates attack you, your troops are less likely to tuck tail and run. If you have low national morale, though, their effectiveness at fighting is decreased, and the likelihood of them retreating due to cowardice is also higher. So just be aware of that. That's why the national morale is really important, and that's why I don't advocate doing such things as raising taxes, for example, because it costs you two morale. You can get away with the morale hit as a Confederate. It's much harder as a Union to get away with that. Or play other cards that affect your national morale, like anyways, I thought I had one here that I could pull really quickly, but apparently not. But a couple of these cards actually hit your national morale, so just be aware of that and try and avoid national morale hits. Always opt to build rail in your river pool. Every chance you have, build this for the foreseeable future. I would probably argue you probably should always be doing the rail pool throughout the entire game because your armies are going to get bigger and you're going to need that infrastructure to push supply to the front. Same thing for Riverpool. I mean, it's also a way of supply. What ends up happening, granted it's 50,000 and 50 war supply, but what a robust rail line will do for you is it ensures that all this supply back here is getting pushed to the front. And what you will find is when you start moving cores by rail, it uses up a lot of your rail lines. So let's see, we've got 475 right now. We've got this core that has 4 divisions in it, and say we want to move them over here. So for 475 to 355, we're already in the red. 1 core. Now imagine if you're moving multiple core in a turn, the effect that has on your rail line. and you can see why it's really important to continually invest every single turn in river pool and rail pool. So do that. It is worth pursuing the bonds that you're given the option for on this page, the Department of Interior. But also, I think you can tolerate a game where you're not printing money. So if you print money, you get $800,000, but you also go up to 4%. Your inflation goes up 4%, which means everything you buy is 4% more expensive. Issuing war bonds does the opposite. It decreases inflation and it gets you money. So you could envision a world where you're rationing up your money here just through war bonds, and you're decreasing the inflation amount. In the PBEM game I'm playing currently, we're in, what is it? We're going into 63, and my opponent as the Union has -11 inflation. So that means things are 10% cheaper for him to buy, and that's because he hasn't been printing money or raising taxes. So just something to consider. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying if you're going to do it, then do it for the right reasons. For example, this $800,000 you want to spend on infrastructure, building ironworks and armories, or you've got a bunch of artillery that you want to buy for the upcoming spring offensive, that sort of thing. But just be aware that it does have consequences on your overall long-term projected costs. That being said, I'm going to jump around a little bit here on another tip I was going to talk to later. But since I'm talking about it now, invest early and often in your infrastructure. So in the basically demo game that I recorded up through March of 62, I built ironworks as soon as possible. And I did that because what it does is it increases the output in the regions that these are built at. It gives you more money. It gives you more war supply. It gives you more of everything with the ironworks. The armories kind of do the same thing, but on a lower scale or lesser scale. They may not give you cash, but they may give you some more war supply. And I think it makes sense from the Union perspective that if you have the money to burn, to also build a couple of these. Because if you're looking long term, if you're looking at a game that's going to go into 64 or 65, it definitely pays for itself. So definitely, in my opinion at least, build 2 ironworks in 61 or 62, and then I would throw in some armories. And honestly, probably in 62 or 63, I'd build some powder mills too. These powder mills, you're gonna need the ammo if you're going really heavy on the troop sizes. So as you can see here, yeah, we've got a lot of pull right now. We've got a lot of ammo back here, but one robust season of campaigning in Virginia will probably deplete most of this ammo if we're rocking, say, 5 total core in this region. So to summarize on that, invest heavily in infrastructure as the Union. Confederates probably don't invest in anything, but the Union definitely invest in the infrastructure. If you're interested in winning the game by getting more victory points than your opponent, so not winning through national morale, but getting into 1866 and you both have victory points, and whoever has the most victory points wins. So as you can see right now, we have 1798. He has 2702. So we've got some ground to gain on that perspective. What you can do is you can play your region cards, some of which will give you victory points. So, for example, the telegraph line gives you 5 victory points by using it. So essentially what you're doing is you're buying victory points with these cards. So if you're looking at a game, like for example here with the development territory, you get 5 victory points for that. So if you're looking to try and win the game on a victory point scale, I would mix in not only conquering strategic locations, but also, use these cards. If you push 3, the number 3, it'll show you the areas that are strategic locations that give you victory points. So, for example, here, Charlottesville. If we took Charlottesville, we would get victory points for that every turn. Same thing with Morgantown. I prefer to play the more historic way, which is the Union would have never considered a victory if they had not forced the CSA to capitulate. So I don't focus so much on the victory points in my PBEMs as the Union. Instead, I actually focus on trying to win through national morale. But I just feel like that kind of evens the odds a little bit, considering it is very hard to win as the Confederates, given the mechanics of the game and stuff, and it should be, because, well, it was the Confederacy, and they didn't have a lot of a chance to win anyways. I mean, they had some chance, but not a lot. All right, next point is, if the CSA is going to want to push a pretty heavy offensive, it's probably going to come in 61. And what I mean by that is, as you can see here, they pushed really heavily from Shenandoah up into Fredericks, Maryland. And he's probably going to cross the river here. But the way to defend against that is, one, obviously invest resources early in 61 to defending DC. Build these forts here. And then put a division of troops either inside these forts or outside. And what that division's going to do, and obviously put a supply wagon with them, but it's going to slow down the Confederates from being able to rail into Baltimore or DC. It's going to force them to stop right here where these forts are. And it's going to cut off their supply or limit their supply unless or until they take out these forts. And what that will do is give you the time you need to basically relocate your forces from, for example, Manassas, push them back to DC or whatever. So October 61 is probably going to be when you feel a really heavy push by the Confederates. The reason I say October is because they can create divisions. They have better generals than you do. They probably have more troops than you do, since you're still going to be building up troops and conscripts and so forth. And so just be ready for that. And the way you deal with it is, like I said, these forts here have a division each, have, a pretty robust force in DC. And if you do that, it's going to be really hard for a Confederate player to take you out, as long as you're anticipating it. Where I've seen Confederate players be successful on a DC offensive is when not only do they go all in, but the Union player does not anticipate the all-in approach from that Confederate player, and therefore they're not ready for it. But if you can see they're going all in, and if you go pretty much all in with investing resources over in the east, you should be okay. And then what you can do is you can turn those forces into an offensive force come spring of 62. Points to defend in 61. DC, obviously. This river area here. If you can hold Frederickstown, great. If not, just behind the river here. And then over in the west, so not so important in Western Virginia, because once the winter sets in, you can take this all back. But in the west, you're going to want to hold Cairo and St. Louis. Alright, so those three, DC, Cairo, and St. Louis, is where you're going to want to invest your defensive resources. Make sure you can hold those first before doing anything else. So make sure you can hold St. Louis first before pushing down to Springfield. Make sure you can hold Cairo first before pushing to Springfield or pushing down. Cities with tents are where brigades are formed. So those are the points that you're going to want to take out or hold if you are the opposing player. So for example, let's give you, I'm trying to find an easy state here. Okay, if you push 5, it'll give you the state layout. Let's look at Connecticut here, since that'll be pretty easy. And then Control F4 will take everybody off the map. So where can we build troops in Connecticut? The capital is one place. And then I actually don't see a tent here, so I don't know if there's anywhere else we can build here anyways. That was such a terrible example, because there you go. It's like you can build all over Connecticut. If you see a tent, that's where you can build troops, and then you have your capital, which is where you can also build troops. I was just trying to give you an illustration so you can kind of see. For Missouri, for example, you can build in, and I only know this because I play with the Confederates. You can build here, and then you can build in Springfield, and I want to say you can also build up in Jefferson, Missouri, and then obviously St. Louis. But if you're the Confederates, you're going to hold Springfield, and then there's your the depot and the city. New Madrid. So anyways, the point of all this, which I didn't do a very articulate job of explaining it, but if you see a tent, that's where recruiting can happen. But additionally, just be aware of where you can build troops at. And this is so random. Like, why would the AI do that? It's the most random place for a supply depot. Anyway, sorry. Just be aware of where your opponent can build troops at, because those are the locations you're going to want to take from them, so that way they can't build any additional troops from that state. So like right here, see, there's a tent right there. And so that point being is build on your border states first. So build your Kentucky troops first, which you can build a lot. The reason is if the Confederates come in and take over all the places that you can recruit at in Kentucky, you've already built your Kentucky troops, and so therefore you're not going to be limited in terms of your resource pool here. So as you can see, we got Bowling Green, Munfordville, and then was this Louisville, I think? Yeah, Louisville. And Lexington. So if we lost all those areas, we wouldn't be able to build these Kentucky troops. So just be aware of that. Also, artillery can only be built in certain spots, so that's important to be aware of. So you don't want to lose Lexington, because then you won't be able to build any Kentucky artillery. So anyways, be strategic about who you build and where you build. Okay. Try and avoid building 6-pounders in your brigades, unless you're going to use them as defense. So what I mean by that is if you go here, so here's this brigade here has a 6-pounder built into it. Well, the problem is the ideal composition for a division is 4 artillery, 2 cavalry, 1 sharpshooter, and the rest infantry. So let me see if I've got one here. It can be difficult to round out your divisions early in the game, but here we go. So here's a good example. So all infantry, 1 sharpshooter, 2 cavalry, and then 4 artillery. And as you can see, this artillery is a mix of 12-pounders and a 20-pound. Well, if you have those brigades with 6-pounders in them, like we do down here, you end up taking up those slots with light 6-pound artillery, which aren't very effective. And you obviously want this composition where you have the 12s and the 20s. So the way you avoid that is you don't buy those brigades that come with the 6-pounders in them, unless you can avoid it. Now, as the game progresses, you get into a position where you can't avoid it. It's just going to be, it is what it is, especially the Confederates. But as best as you can avoid it, do this. Again, one of the ways you can avoid it is building troops in those borderland areas first. That way, if you lose the ability to recruit, say in Missouri or Kentucky, then you've already built all these guys, and so you don't have to go with the 6-pounders. Now, that being said, 6-pounders do have their benefits. So this particular kind of unit would be really good for a static defense. So this is the kind of guy you're going to want to stick, up here in New Albany, where we have a supply depot, or Louisville, or right here along the rail line, where in Barron, Kentucky, to hold this rail line junction. So those 6-pounders are really good for that. That's where you're going to want to use these guys. And that goes to my next point, is as you get to the point where you're rounding out these divisions, what I would say do is take a lot, because when you start off with the force that you have in Alexandria in 61, there's almost all of those infantry cards have 6-pounders in them. So like this guy has several of these guys, because these are the guys that we got in Alexandria. What I would say do is take a lot of these guys as the game progresses and rail them off the front to static defense locations. So instead of having to buy more, you just use these guys instead. So, maybe I would take this guy and rail him over to Kentucky, take this guy and put him, in Morgantown, or, down here in Norfolk when I take over Norfolk. Just that. So just bear in mind that you have a lot of these built-in 6-pound cards out here. And what you should be doing is what we're doing here, for example, where you have guys like this. So no artillery, no cavalry, using them to fill out those infantry spots, and then using those 6-pound guys and using them as static defense at points, points where you want to defend. Okay, so again, to summarize, try not to, if at all possible, buy these kind of guys here with the 6 pounds built into them, because you want those divisions to have 12 pounders, 10 pounders, 20 pounders in them. But if you do have units like this, like you do out in Virginia, rail them to static defensive locations where those 6 pounders are going to be really helpful. You know, defending cities, being across rivers, those sort of things. This goes to my next point, which is for entrenchment level. Your entrenchment level is going to be capped if you don't have artillery in it. So, for example, we have no artillery here. So his fortification level in 62, I think is going to be capped at 4. But if we have artillery in here, I think it'd be capped at 5. So for places that you want to dig in at, make sure you have at least 1 artillery piece there, because then you can maximize the entrenchment level. And because without that artillery, you're not going to be able to maximize that entrenchment level. One final point on building divisions that I wanted to hit on here is, you know, in addition to the 15 total elements in a division and having 4 artillery, 2 cavalry, a sharpshooter, and the rest infantry, if you can, have a marine or a sailor in there. That'll help with your river crossing penalty. Or have an elite brigade in there. 1 elite brigade per division. And I would say, you know, if you can get 2, so for the Union at least, because you have a lot of elite brigades, you want to have most of your divisions have elite brigades in there under your corps. But, you know, at least 1 per corps, preferably 2 within your corps. Now, another thing, too, is with your corps, you want them to be evened out. This will be my next point. So we have 2 divisions here, and Dick's, we have 3 divisions. But preferably what you want, 3, because I took the guys out of here. But what you ultimately want is you want those divisions to be even. You want 2 and 2 or 3 and 3. Because what will happen is if you go to battle, the corps with the fewer divisions is going to suffer more hits. So I don't know if it's more advantageous to go into battle 3 and 2, or if it actually makes more sense to go 2 and 2. But just be mindful that you want to, as best as possible, to even out the dispersion of divisions within your corps. Each corps should have a headquarters or a doctor. I don't know what he has. Let me clean this up right quick so I can see. So he's got an engineer. He doesn't even have a doctor yet. So we should have a doctor or a HQ in with this corps as well. And then whenever you can, split off your army commander from the corps stacks so you get that extra layer of leadership. Now, that being said, if you want your army commander to lead the battle, which in this case we do because he has 3 defense, and these corps commanders only have 1 defense, so we want him to lead both the attack as well as the defense, then you got to put an artillery piece in here. Now, the reason I say that is an artillery piece is an offensive card, and so it will lead him to engage in battle if there is a battle, even in the region that he's in, because he has that offensive card. If we are attacked right now, so say Longstreet attacks us, then these corps commanders, one of these 2 corps commanders is going to lead the battle. He will not, because he doesn't have any offensive units to fight with. So it's really important if you're going to do this and you're not going to have your army commander leading your corps, like actually have him in one of these corps, then you want to put an artillery piece there. That way, if there is a battle, he will lead it and do that. Now, why don't I have him in one of these corps? Why do I have these 3-1-1s? Because their strategic number is 3. His strategic number is only 2. So as far as movement is concerned and pitching battle, we want our corps commanders to do that because they have a 3 strategic rating, whereas he only has 2. But because his offensive rating is 3 and his defensive rating is 3, we want that artillery piece in there so that if Whipple, say, crosses the river and does engage in combat, we want him to move to the sound of guns and lead that battle. So it's kind of, you get the best of both worlds, really. You got Whipple with his strategic rating getting to where you want him to go, but then you have McDowell then kind of riding up in the rear and contributing his 3 attack and his 3 defense to to the combat. Okay, let me see where we're at here. Okay, another thing you want to do with your divisions is you want an all artillery division as soon as possible. So it's great to have 4 artillery per division, but what is even more advantageous to you is, say, maybe just do 2 artillery per division, but have that all artillery division. Because what an all artillery division does is it gets to shoot a lot and not get shot at in return, and it condenses its fire on one particular division, so it maximizes its impact in battle. So what it might do is say, who's one of the guys he's got in here? So Huger, you got an entire division of artillery that might fight on Huger's division in a turn, in say one of the hours of battle. That could drastically reduce his cohesion to the point of making him ineffective. So then when one of your divisions volleys on Huger, he then breaks and runs or disintegrates. So for the Union, I highly advise, as soon as possible, having each corps have its own division of artillery. And then obviously do what you can in terms of your divisions with artillery, but this, in my opinion, is far more important, and go with that. Use flatboats to build supply depots. So if you push 2, that'll show you your supply depot chain. And we did that. We used a supply depot up here at New Albany. We actually used 2 of them. And with the idea being that once Kentucky was in play, we could push supply down to Bowling Green, where we also used a supply depot, or a flatboat, to build a supply depot. And flatboats are let's see, what's the cost difference here, just so I can show you. So a supply wagon is 84.20.48, 84.20.48, 80.40.28, and a flatboat's only 20 and 4. So a significant difference in cost. Okay. So wherever possible, build flatboats instead of supply wagons. You can only do it on rivers, right? So it needs to be navigable. But, we built one here, built one there. Over in the far west, build one in Southern California. Because, again, it's really cheap. And then if you end up taking over any areas on the East Coast, you can do the same thing. Use flatboats to build supply depots there, too. All right? So flatboats are huge. Be sure to use them. And use them, you don't have to use them sparingly. I'd really use them wherever you can. Double down, build 2 like we did in New Albany. So you have a size 2 depot instead of a size 1. Supply depots, yeah, actual supply depots in terms of the wagon, or the cards rather. Use those. Let's see, where you at? I always skip over it. I don't know why I'm so difficult for me to see. Okay, so supply depot, this one right here. You need a unit. I think you need military control or something. But build one right north of Springfield so that you're parked right next to Springfield and can push right into Springfield at a moment's notice. Build one in the far west. A couple, actually. So you could build one down here at Fort Craig or in one of these cities here. And then what that'll do is it'll push from Denver the supply here down to Fort Garland and then down to here, which then will give you eventually enough supply to push down and take El Paso. So use those supply cards. You can do the same thing with supply wagons, but use those supply cards. Are a lot cheaper. What was the cost on that? 35,000 and 5 conscripts. Right? Again, considerably cheaper than a supply wagon. The telegraph line, let me just hit on that just right quick since we got it right here. As you may have noted from my Union demo playthrough, I like to use them on areas that are 75 civilization and up, because if you get it up to 80, they'll be rich. One of the things I forgot to mention in my demo is that in addition to boosting it by just a little bit the money, it also boosts the overall output from that region. So for money purposes, it makes sense to do it here because it increases loyalty and it also increases your gold, in my opinion. So see, we're rich. But for other areas that are now rich because we use a telegraph line, so for example, I want to say Baltimore. This is Baltimore. So we're building this, but then that also means that all these other things that Baltimore produces on a turn, 16 supply, 4 ammo, 2 money, 4 war supply, 10 supply, etc., etc. That should receive a little bit of a boost from going from a civilized region to a rich region. So use your telegraph lines in that manner to boost output in areas that are, good for you economically. And the best way to do that is to get them to hit all the 75 ones and boost them to rich. You get 3 commanders that can train up conscripts and militia up to line infantry. You got McClellan. You've got Halleck. Okay, see, training officer. And you have Siegel, where's he at? He pops up in March of 62. And I forget where he popped. Here, he's over here. Okay, and he's also a training officer. So obviously they're going to be the backbone for the Union Army. If you think about, you've got 3 officers that are training up 6 elements of infantry from militia to conscript or conscript to line infantry every single turn. That's a lot of troops over the course of a war. So make sure they're strategically located. They will not train up troops if they're moving. So if we took Halleck and attacked this turn, that's 2 elements of infantry that are not getting upgraded that turn because he's on the move. So use that. So see, these guys are conscripts. They were militia first. Now they've been trained up to conscripts. But what they work really well for is rounding out your divisions. So, for example, like this, let's see here. Like say this guy. Say we attached one of these elements of 3. Say we attached one of these guys. Actually, we could probably use him as an example. So bump, 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 bump. So he's got 3, 3, 3, 3, right? Well, he's got 3 more elements, it looks like, so that would work out. But say he only had 2 more elements or even just 1 more element of space. That's what these guys are great for. You take these guys, you can fill out your divisions pretty effectively. But strategically locate those 3 guys. Make sure they're not doing a lot of moving. Their benefit to you is their ability to train up those troops, not to fight battles or anything. So I like having Halleck at K-Row because what I can do is I can take all my troops that I want to train up, dump them in K-Row, get them trained up, and then this is a good location to push them to Missouri, push them down into Mississippi, or rail them over to Kentucky. Same thing with McClellan, either sticking him in the Shenandoah or up in Philadelphia and just training up troops. I like having Siegel up here in York because that's where you can build a lot of Pennsylvania troops. And so right here, right there. So having Siegel there, as soon as these guys are activated, he starts training them up immediately. But I wouldn't just use conscripts. You can also use militia. I would note that conscripts tend to be the same price as line infantry, which is kind of weird. So for example, 2 conscripts is 42 money, 20 conscript, 4 war supply. Well, go with Delaware, so I can show you. I might have built all the Delaware guys already. So this guy's got 1 in line infantry and 1 conscript, and he's the same price. So he's actually better than the Pennsylvania 2 conscripts. Yeah, so 42.24, and then a line infantry and conscript is 42.24. So you can definitely use these training officers to train up your conscripts, but be sure to also use militia as well and do the same thing. Get those militia trained up as well to line infantry. They can also train up mounted line infantry to cavalry, and I believe trained up conscript cavalry to full-on cavalry as well. So use them for that purpose as well. You also get conscript officers. So we currently have banks. So as you can see here, he will muster new conscripts on a regular basis in cities of level 5. Bear in mind that this loyalty is also affected by this. So not only do you want him in a level 5 plus city, you want him in a region that has good loyalty, because that's going to boost the amount of conscripts that he helps you produce per turn. So I have him up here in Philadelphia because the loyalty is 84, right? We're not going to go sticking him in Baltimore where the loyalty is 45, or rather 50. So you get a couple of these guys, stick them inside the city, and stick them inside a city that has that's 5 plus and also has a good loyalty rating. In my Union demo game, I showed you the effect of having him not in the city did to the number of conscripts I got per turn. You also get McClernandon. He's another conscript guy. So I have him up in Chicago because, again, loyalty is 86, and it's a size 12 city. So I feel like he's a 3-1-1 general, so he's not that impressive, but that conscript rating there really boosts the number of conscripts you get per turn over the course of a game. So use them for sure, and use them in regions that have good loyalty. Use martial law commanders in low loyalty areas that also can have the potential for high output. Good example is St. Louis. So St. Louis loyalty in 61 it gets as low as like almost 20%. And so you've got to do a lot to get the loyalty boosted up here. Habeas corpus, martial law, and then using these commanders that have martial law. So Fremont is an absolutely horrendous army commander, but he does have the occupier trait. So when commanding a stack, this leader will not hesitate to proclaim martial law, which basically means that having him inside the city will over time boost loyalty. So be sure to use him, and then also use high police units to boost the loyalty in a region to consequently boost production in that region. So good example here, we've got a depot, we've got a shipyard, a barracks. I mean, all of these things in St. Louis, and all of this production is correlated with loyalty. So the higher the loyalty, the higher this output's going to be, and therefore you want to have guys like him and high police units like cavalry inside the city to over time boost the loyalty in that region. And to give you a good illustration of, by the way, this is one of the guys I was telling about. You can get these guys trained up using the training officers and make them actual full-on cavalry. But if you take cavalry here, his police is 3. So having him inside a city is going to help boost the loyalty more so than one of these infantry guys who only has a police of 1.